1 second later, the town that lost its light, the small town of Millhaven, slept beneath a blanket of stars, its houses glowing faintly with the warmth of lamps and the comfort of routine. Children dreamed in their beds, dogs curled at the foot of porches, and streetlights hummed with a steady glow that had become the lullaby of the community. To anyone passing through, Millhaven seemed timeless, a place untouched by chaos, frozen in the embrace of safety. But fate, cruel and silent, had already begun to unravel that illusion. It began with a flicker. One streetlight at the edge of town blinked twice, its bulb stuttering against the night. A passing truck driver noticed but thought nothing of it. Streetlights failed all the time. Yet in that moment, Millhaven's pulse faltered. The darkness gathered, stretching invisible fingers toward the heart of town. Eliza, the night shift nurse at Millhaven Clinic, was the first to feel it. She stepped out for a breath of cool air and frowned at the sudden hush. The crickets had stopped singing, the dogs had stopped barking. The only sound was her own breath, sharp in the silence. Then the clinic's lights snapped off, plunging her into blackness. Across town, Officer Grant sipped lukewarm coffee in his patrol car. His dashboard flickered, the radio spat static. And then silence. The headlights dimmed until the cruiser was swallowed by night. He tapped the wheel nervously, muttering, "Not now." But no matter how many times he twisted the ignition, the engine refused to answer. Inside their homes, families stirred as lamps winked out, televisions sighed into silence, and phones went dead in trembling hands. Candles were lit, flashlights fetched, jokes muttered to mask unease. Power outages were rare in Millhaven. But they happened. People assured each other the lights would return soon. They didn't. The first hour passed slowly. Neighbors stepped onto porches, calling across the dark with nervous laughter. Children clutched teddy bears while parents whispered excuses about overloaded lines or storms somewhere far away. Yet above them the sky was clear, and the stars glared down like unblinking witnesses. The second hour brought unease. Generators failed to start. Batteries drained too quickly. Cars stalled on empty roads, their hazard lights dead. Millhaven wasn't just powerless. It was being silenced, stripped of every comfort, every machine, every hum of modern life. A suffocating stillness pressed against the town, as though the darkness itself had weight. By the third hour, fear began to crawl. Eliza lit lanterns in the clinic. But the equipment was dead, the fridges warming, the heart monitors blank. Officer Grant walked the streets with a heavy flashlight that dimmed with each step, his calls over the radio answered only by static. He passed families huddled together, their eyes wide and searching. "Stay calm," he told them, though his voice betrayed a quiver. At midnight, a scream shattered the uneasy quiet. It came from the southern end of town, high and panicked. Doors opened, people spilled into the streets, hearts racing. Grant sprinted toward the sound. But when he arrived, he found nothing. Only a rocking swing on a porch, creaking in the wind. The family inside swore their daughter had vanished in the dark. Panic spread like wildfire. Parents clutched children tighter. Locks clicked on doors. Prayers whispered into the night. The darkness seemed alive now, swallowing sound, devouring courage. Every second stretched thin, every shadow too deep. Eliza gathered patients at the clinic, turning the lobby into a makeshift shelter. She spoke firmly, reminding everyone to stay together, to keep candles lit. But even she couldn't ignore the gnawing dread that something was moving in the black. She felt it in the prickling of her skin, in the way her breath caught whenever she turned her head too quickly. The mayor tried to rally hope, shouting from the steps of town hall that the outage was temporary, that order would hold. But as he spoke, the candles around him flickered violently, one by one dying until he was swallowed mid-sentence. His voice broke. His authority vanished with the flame. By dawn, Millhaven was no longer a town. It was a cage of fear. The sun rose but brought no light. The sky above remained trapped in permanent twilight, gray and oppressive. As if the darkness had swallowed the day itself. People wept openly now, begging for answers. But no one had them. Children whispered about shadows moving on their own, about eyes glowing faintly in corners. Adults dismissed them, but unease tightened every stomach. Livestock refused to leave barns. Dogs growled at empty spaces. The silence between heartbeats grew unbearable. On the second day, food began to spoil, water pumps failed. And desperation brewed. Arguments erupted over candles, batteries, scraps of bread. Millhaven, once a picture of unity, began to fracture under the pressure. Officer Grant broke up fights with a shaking voice, his own fear barely contained. Then came the second disappearance. A man was seen walking to the well at dawn, his lantern bobbing. Minutes later, the lantern was found smashed on the ground, still warm. The man was gone. His family collapsed in tears, his name shouted into the dark until their voices cracked. But the dark gave nothing back. Rumors spread that the town had been cursed, that something ancient had awoken beneath the soil. Others claimed it was punishment, that Millhaven had been chosen. Whatever the explanation, fear hardened into terror. And the townspeople began marking their doors with chalk crosses, whispering to any god that might still be listening. On the third night, Eliza heard scratching at the clinic windows. She turned, her lantern trembling in her hand. But nothing was there. The scratching continued, higher now, along the roof. She ordered everyone to stay inside, to stay quiet. But the children sobbed and the sound grew louder. Officer Grant arrived, his flashlight barely holding. And together they stared into the dark, praying the glass would hold. The town realized then that the darkness was not just absence. It was presence. It was alive, aware, and hungry. By the fourth day, Millhaven was collapsing. People no longer slept. They dozed fitfully in corners, clutching candles that burned too fast, wax dripping onto trembling fingers. Every sound in the dark became a warning, every silence a threat. The town was unraveling. And still the lights did not return. The mayor vanished on the morning of the fourth day. His wife claimed she heard him whispering in his sleep, a voice not his own pulling him toward the door. She tried to hold him back. But he slipped free, stepping into the darkness barefoot, unblinking. But though answering a call, she never saw him again. At the clinic, Eliza's lanterns were running out. She rationed what little light remained, guiding families to huddle close. She spoke with steady words, though her own heart raced in her chest. She was their anchor now, even as shadows licked along the edges of the walls like creeping vines. Officer Grant patrolled without rest, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. He had stopped pretending to be brave. He simply moved, checking on families, counting heads, making sure the town didn't collapse entirely. Yet each time he returned, the count was smaller. People were disappearing faster now. On the fifth night, screams erupted near the church. Dozens ran to see, their candles forming a trembling procession. Inside, pews were overturned, hymnals scattered, and the altar was clawed as if by inhuman hands. The priest was gone, his robes torn and left behind. A child whispered that she had seen him lifted into the air by something tall and black. No one argued. The people began to realize that light alone wasn't enough. The darkness was inside them now, whispering in dreams, tugging at their thoughts. Mothers clutched children tighter, whispering lullabies to drown the voices. Fathers sharpened kitchen knives, though they knew blades meant little against what stalked them. On the sixth day, the town's animals broke free. Horses screamed in their stalls, goats kicked down fences, dogs ran into the shadows and never returned. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, a hollow absence that made the town feel smaller, emptier, doomed. Eliza gathered survivors in the town square, demanding they stay together. The dark can't take us if we hold on to each other, she insisted. Though doubt gnawed at her own words. Faces stared back, pale and gaunt. But they nodded, desperate to believe in something. That night, they built a bonfire in the center of Millhaven, feeding it with broken furniture, doors, books, anything that would burn. The flames rose high, pushing shadows back, giving the people a taste of safety. For the first time in days they slept. But the darkness adapted. As the fire crackled, figures appeared just beyond the glow, tall, thin silhouettes with eyes like dying embers. They circled slowly, never stepping into the light, never speaking. But their presence stole the warmth from the flames. Children wailed, mothers screamed, and the fire roared higher as if terrified too. At dawn, the fire had burned out, reduced to blackened ash. The figures were gone. But so were 6 more townsfolk. Their names were whispered with tears. But their bodies were never found. Millhaven was shrinking piece by piece. Officer Grant stood before the townspeople, his voice raw. "We can't stay here," he said. "The dark will take us all." But where could they go? Every road out of Millhaven vanished into endless night. Cars were dead, compasses spun uselessly. And those who tried to walk away never returned. They were trapped, a town imprisoned in eternal dusk. By the 7th night, fear turned to madness. Neighbors accused each other of consorting with the darkness. Fights broke out, homes were raided for scraps of light. And trust dissolved like smoke. The darkness didn't need to kill them all. It only needed to wait while they destroyed themselves. Eliza refused to give up. She gathered the last of the children, leading them into the clinic basement where candles flickered weakly. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her own fear hidden behind a motherly smile. She knew they were running out of time. Grant joined her, his uniform torn, his badge dull. He carried a single lantern, the flame trembling as though it knew it was the last. "We're down to dozens," he muttered. "Dozens from hundreds." His eyes were wet, his voice cracking. He was a man watching the end of his world. The children asked questions no adult could answer. "Why is the dark angry? When will the sun come back? Did we do something wrong?" Eliza held them, her silence louder than any lie she could have told. On the 8th night, the figures returned, closer this time. Their eyes glowed brighter, their shapes more solid. They pressed against windows, their long fingers tapping at glass, their breath fogging the panes. The people screamed, prayed, cowered. But Eliza stood tall, her candle lifted high, daring the dark to take her. The figures retreated, but only for the moment. By now, Millhaven was a skeleton of itself. Shops empty, houses abandoned, the streets echoing with absence. Only the clinic and town hall remained filled with the stubborn, the faithful, the terrified. They clung to light and hope like shipwreck survivors to driftwood. But the waves of night were rising. By the 9th day, Millhaven no longer felt like a town. It felt like a graveyard that hadn't finished burying its dead. The silence was so heavy it seemed to press on lungs, making every breath an effort. Survivors whispered prayers to gods they barely remembered, clutching fading candles as though wax and fire could shield them from eternity. Eliza began to hear the whispers too. At first, she thought it was exhaustion, her mind tricking her. But the voices grew stronger, sliding into her ears when she closed her eyes, urging her to step outside, to give herself to the shadows. She clenched her fists until her nails drew blood, reminding herself she was still here, still alive, still fighting. Grant staggered into the clinic one evening, lantern nearly dead, his face pale. "They're not just outside anymore," he rasped. "I saw one in the street, standing in the open. It looked at me, Eliza. It knows my name." His words sent shivers through the gathered crowd, as though the darkness had finally breached their last defense. That night, the figures did not linger at the edges. They stepped closer, their shapes clearer, skeletal yet towering, cloaked in shadows that seemed to drip from them like tar. Their eyes burned with cruel hunger, fixing on every trembling human face. The survivors huddled tighter, their candles sputtering as though strangled by invisible hands. One by one, the flames went out. Screams tore through the clinic as hands, impossibly long, impossibly cold, reached through shattered windows. Eliza grabbed children, pulling them into the basement, shouting for Grant. The officer roared, swinging his baton uselessly at the figures, his voice raw with defiance. He fought until the lantern died, and the dark swallowed his cry. Eliza pressed the basement door shut, barricading it with shelves and boxes, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The children sobbed in the flickering light of a single candle, the last one left in Millhaven. She whispered stories to them, stories of sunlight, of warm mornings, of laughter in parks. Each word was a prayer, each syllable a shield. Hours stretched into eternity. The candle burned lower, its flame shrinking. The children's sobs grew quieter, their exhaustion overtaking fear. Eliza sat with her back against the door, listening to the scratching outside, her eyes fixed on the dying flame. She knew once it went out, there would be nothing left to hold the dark at bay. And then silence. The scratching stopped. The whispers faded. The figures receded. For the first time in days, the town was still. Eliza dared to hope that maybe, somehow, they had survived the storm of darkness. The candle died. Eliza opened her eyes to pitch black. She felt tiny hands clutching her arms, children whimpering in the dark. Her heart hammered, her breath shallow. She whispered, "Stay quiet. Stay with me." But she knew the truth. The light was gone. And Millhaven had finally lost its last defense. Above ground, the town lay empty. Houses stood hollow, doors swaying on broken hinges, streets littered with abandoned belongings. The clock tower was frozen at midnight, its hands unmoving. Millhaven was no more, a ghost town swallowed whole by eternal night. Weeks later, search parties from neighboring counties arrived. They expected storm damage, perhaps a disaster, maybe even looters. What they found was worse. Silence. Not a single person remained. No bodies, no footprints, no signs of struggle. Just a town locked in unnatural twilight, where the sun refused to rise. The only clue was at the clinic basement. The rescuers found the barricade intact, the door sealed. When they forced it open, they found only emptiness. No Eliza, no children, only walls etched with chalk drawings of candles, suns, and smiling faces, desperate sketches in tiny, shaking hands. Reporters called it the Millhaven vanishing. Scientists searched for explanations: electrical collapse, magnetic anomalies, psychological mass hysteria. None could explain the missing people, the frozen clock tower, or why Millhaven remained in darkness when the rest of the world turned beneath the sun. Legends grew. Travelers whispered that if you drive past Millhaven at night, your headlights flicker. And for a moment you see shadows standing at the edge of the road, watching. Some claimed to hear children laughing faintly in the wind. Others swore the town still breathed with whispers if you dared to enter. But no one stayed long. Millhaven was a place where night lived forever, where light had been hunted and lost. And so the story of Millhaven spread, the town that should have thrived, that should have endured. But in 1 second of flickering light, began to unravel. A town where fear became reality. And one candle at a time, every soul was taken. The world learned a harsh truth. Safety is an illusion. Light is a fragile gift. And darkness is always waiting for its chance. Because 1 second later, everything can change. Because Millhaven was the town that lost its light.